Chairman Thune, Ranking Member Nelson, and members of the committee, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. Our nation's infrastructure is the backbone of our world-class economy, the most productive, flexible, and dynamic in the world, and it's a key to our economic growth and productivity. But as you have heard, too much of our infrastructure is aging and in need of repairs. The challenges are everywhere. Traffic congestion and delays cost drivers nearly $160 billion annually. About a quarter of our nation's bridges, as you have heard, are deemed structurally deficient, which means that they're in need of improvement, not that they're unsafe. More than 20% of our roads are in poor condition, and the transportation needs of rural America, which account for a disproportionately high percentage of our nation's highway fatalities, have been ignored for too long. That is why 12 agencies have come together to help develop a comprehensive infrastructure framework, which the President announced as a priority in his State of the Union address in 2018. Transportation is one component, which is why I am joined here by my fellow Cabinet Secretaries. The initiative includes, but is not limited to, drinking and wastewater, energy, broadband, and veterans hospitals as well. The goal of the President's proposal is to stimulate at least $1.5 trillion in investment spending and includes a minimum of $200 billion in direct federal funding. The guiding principles are: 1, to use federal dollars as seed money to incentivize non-federal infrastructure investment; 2, provide for the needs of rural America; 3, streamline permitting to speed up project delivery; and 4, reduce unnecessary and overly burdensome regulations. And as a former Labor Secretary, I'm especially pleased that Secretary Acosta is here to discuss ways to help workers access the skills needed to build these new projects. Some estimates put our country's infrastructure needs at approximately $4 trillion. We cannot address a challenge of this magnitude with federal resources or by borrowing. That approach will crowd out the capital markets, hinder economic growth and job creation. So the President's plan allows the private sector to help in the building of our public infrastructure. Nonprofit endowments and private pension funds, for example, have demand for conservative investments like public infrastructure, which have collateral that will not walk away. In addition, the private sector involvement helps to allocate risk. Under a well-structured transaction, if a project is not successful, the private sector bears the first loss instead of the taxpayers. The department recognizes that different regions require different solutions, but private sector investment in public infrastructure is currently allowed in some form in 35 states and should be encouraged where appropriate. So the department is also implementing the President's One Federal Decision, which was announced on August 15th, 2017, to help speed up the delivery of new infrastructure and reduce cost. But they're not enough to achieve the President's 2-year timeframe. To accomplish this, the redundancies and inefficiencies stemming from multiple federal agencies making decisions on a single project must be addressed. So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Nelson, thank you again for inviting me, and I look forward to answering all of your questions.
Thank you, Secretary Chao. Secretary Ross.
Chairman Thune, Ranking Member Nelson, and members of the committee, I thank you for the invitation. I'll repeat. Chairman Thune, Ranking Member Nelson, and members of the committee, thank you for the invitation to testify on the President's Infrastructure Initiative. As President Trump has long said, our nation's infrastructure is crumbling, and we desperately need better roads, bridges, highways, railways, and waterways across the country. And if we are going to continue growing, creating jobs, and developing a 21st century workforce, we must build this new infrastructure with American heart, American hands, and American grit. First, our plan will streamline permitting for infrastructure projects, remove unnecessary impediments to progress, and we will bring the process down from the current 8-year average to 2 years or less. Here in the room is the President's chart that illustrates the 120 some odd steps required for infrastructure permit approvals. It's almost taller than I am. It's a wonder anything ever gets done. A faster process would provide certainty and free up capital currently wasted on red tape. Commerce is working hard on deregulation. Over the past year, the Department's Regulatory Reform Task Force identified over 50 deregulatory actions that will unleash American ingenuity. Many of these efforts focus on regulations that prevent or delay infrastructure projects. Notably, our National Marine Fisheries Services, NMFS, committed to reduce processing time for informal consultations under the Endangered Species Act from over 100 days to just over 50 days. By eliminating unnecessary steps, increasing tracking, and improving workforce management, we are already exceeding that goal. As you know, the administration's infrastructure initiative proposes to leverage $200 billion federal dollars to spur up to $1.5 trillion of total investment. To accomplish this, the federal government will partner with state, local, tribal, and when appropriate, private sector stakeholders. To be clear, this is not privatization of infrastructure. Rather, we want targeted federal spending that promotes state and local investment while incentivizing public-private partnerships. The goal is to amplify every taxpayer dollar and to restore control to local government. Today, I will focus on the $20 billion Transformative Projects program that will be led by the Department of Commerce. Commerce chairs the committee providing federal aid for bold and innovative projects, transformative projects that would dramatically benefit communities across America. Those projects that would not otherwise attract private sector investment without federal incentives because of the risk, but their potential local and regional impact would provide significant bang for the buck if they succeed. Commerce is already prepared with ideas. Surgically targeted projects like regional hub concepts that link multiple states' economies, satellite-based broadband, new and expanded spaceports, blockchain supply chain management, augmented reality to improve city congestion, and new dredging technologies for deeper ports. Another good example is NOAA's Precision Navigation Project. It transmits high-resolution safety contours, tide levels, currents, wave heights, and other features to help mariners safely navigate congested waterways. The system was applied to the Port of Long Beach, leading to a 4-foot increase in draft, allowing for larger ships and increased traffic. Tankers now can load $8 million more each than previously, and the total cost of the project was only $5 million. Finally, Commerce is developing an infrastructure program for the Select USA Investment Summit this summer. It is the major federal program to promote infrastructure and foreign direct investment. Last year, we had over 3,000 attendees. This year, the young King of Spain will be one of our featured speakers. Spain specializes in infrastructure. The department is also assessing how to bring broadband to rural areas in support of advanced manufacturing, telemedicine, and the evolving digital economy. Commerce stands ready to work with Commerce to develop a comprehensive legislative proposal. The America First strategy must restore our crumbling infrastructure. It's essential to jobs, economic growth, and national security. It's time to build a stronger America. Thank you for inviting me to testify before you today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Secretary Ross. Secretary Acosta.
Chairman Thune, thank you. Ranking Member Nelson, it's good to see you, members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation to testify today to outline how the President's infrastructure plan will strengthen what is the greatest workforce in the world, the American workforce. Last Friday, our Bureau of Labor Statistics announced the strongest monthly job creation numbers since President Trump's election, with nearly 313,000 jobs added. American job creators have added nearly 3 million jobs since the election. Unemployment has fallen to 4.1%, a 17-year low. And the February report also revealed that manufacturing, mining and logging, and construction collectively have had the highest month-to-month growth rate since 1998. And so the President's infrastructure plan has the potential to expand and deepen and extend these positive trends for years to come. It is a great time to be a job seeker in America. It is a great time to be a job creator in America. The President's plan, importantly, not only invests in physical infrastructure, but it also invests in workforce development. As we build infrastructure, we must also ensure that we think about the American workforce that will build this infrastructure and that ultimately benefits from these efforts. And so the President's plan includes common sense targeted approaches to funding and flexibility so that Americans can obtain education directed toward the shared goal that we all have, a good, safe, family-sustaining job. So the President's plan proposes 4 important workforce areas. 1, extend Pell grants to high-quality, short-term programs that provide students with the certification or credentials for in-demand jobs. This is a big one. Extend the Pell grants. Secondly, reform the Perkins career and technical education programs to ensure that more students have access to high-quality technical education to develop skills that are needed and required in our economy. 3, better target federal work-study funds to help more students obtain important workforce experience while they're in school through programs like apprenticeships. And 4, reform occupational licensing requirements for qualified individuals that are working on our nation's infrastructure projects. And so let me take each of these one at a time. Currently, federal law prohibits Pell Grants recipients from using grants for courses and programs that do not meet certain time or length requirements. Short-term workforce development programs can provide immediate economic returns by helping job seekers gain the skills and educations that they need to join the workforce right now, quickly. The infrastructure plan calls for extending federal Pell Grant eligibility to these types of certificate programs that provide credentials. It's real simple. If the American workforce prefers a credential program at the same institution over a longer-term program, why can't they not take that shorter program now and start making money more quickly? Secondly, the Perkins Career and Technical Educational Program. The President's proposal would reform career and technical educational programs. Specifically, the proposal calls for improvements that focus funding on high schools with an emphasis on earn and learn programs that provide hands-on technical experience. This strategy will help create a pipeline of skilled Americans prepared to meet the needs of our economy. Third, federal work-study. There's a need to update federal work-study programs to better support students pursuing career and technical education. Those funds right now are disproportionately distributed to four-year colleges and universities that have been receiving them for decades, disadvantaging qualified community colleges and other programs that are more focused on workplace readiness and on the skills that the economy is demanding today. And so the President's infrastructure calls for updating the funding formula to send these work-study program funds to schools with a strong record of enrolling individuals in Pell Grants and similar programs. And finally, the President's proposal includes a provision to reduce licensing barriers that prevent Americans from using their skills across state lines. I've talked to so many state and local officials, and I've offered the following advice. If licenses are unnecessary, eliminate them. If licenses are necessary, and sometimes they are, for health and safety, streamline them or make them reciprocal with other states. And so the President's plan calls for infrastructure projects that use federal funds to recognize out-of-state licenses, speeding project delivery, reducing costs, and providing something very important to our workforce, mobility and flexibility. And so, in sum, the workforce components of the President's infrastructure plan will empower Americans to build skills and will allow employers to obtain portable credentials with their employees. And in the end, this is going to lead to good family-sustaining jobs. And so we look forward to working with your committee and with other committees to advance what really is a shared goal of good, safe, family-sustaining jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Acosta. Secretary Perdue.
Thank you, Chairman Thune and Ranking Member Nelson and members of the committee. It's a pleasure to visit with you this morning. My colleagues have done a great job describing various aspects of that, and you all have done a great job in demonstrating your acknowledgement of the need and the opportunities that we have before us, and I think it's the goal of this administration to work with the Congress, the Senate, and the House in determining how we get that done. There's no dispute about the need for infrastructure for America and for job creation and for others, and it's up to all of us to deliver for the American people. I represent, as you all know, in the USDA, a rural constituency, and very dependent on infrastructure. I think America's advantage in the world logistics of a surplus in our export of agriculture, frankly, has a lot to do with the infrastructure that's been in place over a number of years. Both the roads, the rail, the waterways of this country have contributed to our ability to deliver farmer-produced, rancher-produced products to the world in a very competitive fashion. And it's very important that we continue to do that as well. Surface transportation is extremely important. Roads and bridges in rural areas where trucks cannot transport across ailing bridges contribute to a lack of productivity. Certainly the waterways that have contributed in draining the heartland of productive America have been very vital in doing that. Our locks and dams are years old, and there's data to say if some of these locks fail, several states and thousands of producers as well as billions of dollars of agricultural product could be impacted as well. So the surface transportation, the inland waterways are important as well, and our colleagues have done a great job describing those needs. You all have identified and also talked about, and I think there's a lot of energy about an area that I think is probably as transformative as any we've mentioned. You mentioned the interstate highway system of 1956. We actually go back with two other examples prior to that, 1934 with the Telephone Act, 1936 with the REA Act. America can do this, and we see what the electrification of America did, what the connectivity with our telephone system did, where we could talk among ourselves and communicate. Today, the internet, high-speed internet, is that interstate highway of the 21st century. And we need a ubiquitous interstate or high-speed internet system across this country, not only for the farmsteads and the rural towns, but the fields of America. When you look at the technology that existed in Illinois for precision agriculture, real productivity, an example, a real-world example is with high-speed internet, sub-inch technology of GPS and the satellites, we can get about a 20 bushel per acre increase with almost half the inputs. You talk about real productivity increase. There are products on the shelf today that manufacturers are waiting to deploy when we have the opportunity for a broadband, ubiquitous broadband activity. And frankly, this will only spur more as we get there. So I'm very pleased with the interest and the energy regarding ubiquitous broadband across America in that way. I do believe it's particularly transformative. in that area. How do we pay for it? Obviously, that's we've got a recommendation and an opening opportunity in that, but that's really where we all come together. I love the spirit of this committee in a bipartisan fashion of understanding the need. How do we do it? Let's just get it done for the American people because it's needed in order for American producers and agriculture to remain competitive. This is a very important issue. So thank you for the opportunity to visit with you today.
Thank you, Secretary Perdue. Secretary Perry.
Yes, sir. Senator Thune, thank you. Ranking Member Nelson, it's my privilege to get to see you, and to the other members. I'm excited to be here today. To sit before you with a distinguished group of men and women who, in most cases, left the private sector to come and serve their country. They're great partners, and we sat before you today to discuss the President's Building a Stronger America plan so that we can have this discussion, how we upgrade, how we modernize our nation's infrastructure and the processes that we use to evaluate and to approve these projects. The fact that these four other cabinet members are sitting here, I think, underscores very clearly the emphasis that the President's putting on this. He understands the far-reaching impact that infrastructure has across the federal government. And in my capacity as Secretary of Energy, and I might add as a private citizen, I've been rather blessed to travel almost to every state in the nation over the course of the last 20 or 30 years. And in far too many places, it's just struck me about how outdated the infrastructure is. There are too many instances where it is just absolutely an unacceptable state of disrepair. It's damaging our nation's competitiveness and our citizens' quality of life. Fortunately, there is bipartisan agreement here that we got to do something about this. We got to build. We got to build more. And when I say infrastructure, you know, most people think about airports, seaports, the waterways, other assets that are generally considered public infrastructure. But infrastructure also includes this vast and predominantly privately held, owned and operated network of rails, of wires, nearly 2.4 million miles of pipeline that move energy to American families. And our economy really relies upon that. This interconnected web of critical assets, they carry products that fuel our cars, they heat our homes, they power our businesses. Much of this infrastructure goes unseen. But let me tell you, the moment the lights don't come on or the heat isn't there, people are paying attention. And as the secretary that's charged with, and I might add, supporting America's energy sector infrastructure, I'm intently focused on the strength of that infrastructure and, Senator Thune, its security. Now, I'm not a regular witness here in front of this committee, but I never miss an opportunity to share with the members of the Senate the work that we're doing over at the department to enable industry, system operators, regulators to protect America's energy infrastructure from cyber or physical attacks. DOE is in the process of establishing a new Office of Cybersecurity, Energy Security, Emergency Response, acronym is CSER, to enhance the resilience of our energy assets and better protect them from this growing cyber threat that is out there. Both the public and the private sector also need to upgrade, to modernize our physical infrastructure. Just like Sonny, a farmer governor, I enthusiastically support the way that the President is planning to do so. And let me share with you why, from my perspective. First and foremost, the President's plan, it embraces America's time-honored Federalist tradition. All too often, you all may have heard me say this before I even took this current job, Washington, when they see a problem, it imposes these top-down mandates to what are uniquely local challenges. The President's plan takes a partnership approach that recognizes the local need while also building with our national interest in mind. It's based on the common sense notion that government that's closest to the people is best suited to understand and to meet their needs. The President's plan gives the nation's governors the power and the flexibility to prioritize infrastructure projects that will benefit their respective states. Equally important, the President is committed to reforming the federal process, or I should say the federal permitting process, to reduce the burdensome red tape that has delayed or prevented some construction projects from breaking ground. This is a pretty good example of it right here, the current permitting process. It's fractured, it's redundant, it requires projects to navigate a huge maze of federal regulations, and he wants to see that process not only streamlined but substantially cut back. So I think it's also important that we take into account the President's tax reform law. Permitting reform is going to give businesses the confidence, the certainty, freedom that they need to take transformative projects from conception to completion. And let me just quickly, in finishing up here, give you an energy-related perspective on what this will mean. America is in the midst of this absolutely stunning energy transformation, and thanks to the President's policies, we're beginning to share our energy resources around the world. Sharing more of our energy abundance has tremendous implications here and abroad. Geopolitically, it frees our allies from reliance on unstable and unfriendly sources, and it reduces our trade deficit. Domestically, the jobs that created, those of you that have those jobs in your districts, you know the power that our energy industry is having out there. But beyond energy, streamlining, permitting, and modernizing our infrastructure will combine to revive our nation at a time when it's sorely needed. So, Mr. Chairman, my colleagues and I urge you to support this bold plan, and we look forward to working with this committee and Congress on its enactment. Thank you.